What's up, Flanovers? It is week 12. This is Thursday night football. We're going to be going position by position for DraftKings Showdown as usual, starting with quarterbacks, then running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, and kickers. I am here with Adam, ShipMyMoney, Scherer to break the whole thing down. Adam, kind of a funky slate here with change at quarterback. I mean, I guess we've had Davis Mills for a couple games, but rotating receivers and tight ends for the Bills. Are you? Do you think you have a good read on this slate?
I as good as you can, I think. But projecting rates and everything, looking through receiver rates from both teams is kind of just like with Houston, obviously, you know who the one is. On the Bills, you kind of have a one, but he's a slot receiver. And then it's just a bunch of guys where it's like, yeah, they're going to run between like 30 and 60% of routes. And hopefully you have the ones in your lineup that they actually throw it to.
Yeah, it's like and it also feels like it's going to be a low scoring slate. So it's kind of like,
right.
You probably just need the one who scores a touchdown, and you hope that that's the one that's low owned is kind of how I'm playing it, I think. We will, of course, be going, again, position by position. So we will get there to break down the receivers, but it's kind of a mess. We have Curtis Samuel and Mecole Hardman were in the rotation last week for the Bills. They're going to be out this week. Dalton Kincaid out again for the Bills. Sounds like Keon Coleman is going to be out again. We don't know that for sure, especially with some new receivers out. So it's a bit difficult to know who's going to be playing here for the Bills. Okay, I'm going to check my mic here. But we'll start at quarterback. Adam, you can start at the top with Josh Allen. How much you get into there?
Yeah, Allen, obviously one of the few pieces in this game that you can feel good about getting to. It's not a good matchup overall. Houston, obviously a good team defensively, likely to be able to get pressure on him, etc. But there are so many guys in this game where you're not going to feel comfortable at all. Obviously, you're expecting solid production from Allen. He's the highest projected guy on the slate. I don't really think that can be debated even. So I am getting to him. Not quite as much as some other top end quarterbacks that I've gotten to on Showdown slates this year, but have him projected right now for 42% flex and a 42% captain. Like, that is a lot of ownership. I'm a little bit over at flex, getting to 55%, but I only have 15% at captain right now, which would obviously be the most interesting part. And I think it's probably just like, on the one hand, you can go a lot of different ways on this slate because there are so many viable like playmaking options, even though there aren't many that you're going to be super confident in. But still, when you're allocating that much salary to captain along with 40 to 50% of the field, you're going to run into issues of being on similar roster construction to 40 to 50% of the field, I would think. So I'm guessing that's why the captain ownership for me is relatively low. Obviously, like, getting to Josh Allen, a captain, is going to project well. It's going to look good. I think it's one of those things where, like, in smaller field stuff, obviously the ownership gets even higher than in large field, but like, you have less dupe issues. You have less people to compete with. Probably more of a small field captain than large field captain for me, assuming that ownership holds. Like, if by the time we get the lock, you're down to, 20% ownership or something, then that would seem better. But, you can see on your screen, and it's similar in the most recent sim I ran, 22% chance of being optimal at captain. If he's actually going to project for 42% ownership, that's just a spot where, regardless of what the guy's name is, I'm going to assume that I'm not getting as much as the field.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how little I'm getting here. I mean, 74% total ownership, I think, on Josh Allen. Don't remember what so just like one of the few good, like, projectable plays we have on the slate. So I like sort of thought like I could just get 100% here because we just have so little we can be confident. Like, can we even be confident in James Cook against this Texans defense? Can we be confident at all in Khalil Shakir ever? Probably not. Nico Collins against the Bills, like, we just don't have a ton that we can be like, yeah, this player is definitely going to score at least like 15 fantasy points. And Josh Allen, like, clearly is the one guy that it's like we can pretty much count on Josh Allen, I think, scoring at least 15 to 20 fantasy points just because he does it in so many different ways. But that also might not be enough on, depending on what everybody else does. So I'm a little bit surprised to see him only getting to 74% currently. But yeah, I guess we also just the fact that we have so little that we can count on, maybe that just means that it's going to end up being more in the mid-range than we're expecting. Like, I guess I look at this and I think this is probably going to be a stars and scrubs slates with all the like gross low end wide receivers, but maybe it just is more likely to be like you just need 14 apiece out of your like top end Khalil Shakir, Nico Collins, Woody Marks, and then you can't actually afford to get to the low end. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why we're not getting into more Josh Allen than I would expect.
So one thing I do like, I just started looking at my lineups that didn't have Josh Allen at all, and they are mostly using like 49 to 50K salary.
Okay.
So that does make me feel at least a little bit better. I would have been really hesitant if I just pulled up a bunch of, like 46.5K lineups. Not that you can't leave salary on the table in Showdown, but Josh Allen is so clearly the guy that you would feel the most comfortable with, that does project the best, that does have the highest floor of anybody. I'd be really hesitant if I'm just like not playing Josh Allen and I'm leaving the money on the table to get to Josh Allen. But I'm just getting to lineups that I think are reasonable. It's lineups that have Nico, they have Marks, they have Cook. While there's not a lot you're going to be confident in this game outside of Josh Allen from a projection standpoint, there is still talent. Like Nico Collins is good. Davis Mills, isn't quote unquote good, but he is a quarterback that can score enough fantasy points. James Cook is good. Woody Marks is, based on the last 2 weeks, like a true RB1 in terms of workload. Obviously that comes with the caveat of that can change at any given time, but it seems like they are really committing to Woody Marks based on the last couple of weeks. So, and then, you do have an abundance of wide receivers that are going to run 30 to 60% of routes and could have decent games. So like there is talent here. It's just that all of that talent outside of Josh Allen comes with like but this sucks about him today. In Nico Collins' case, it's that he is playing with Davis Mills, although that hasn't been a bad thing necessarily.
No, it's been good.
But you assume, long-term, bigger sample size, that it's not a good thing. It's, you assume not a great thing for the offense overall, but so far it's been good through 2 games. With Woody Marks, it's, well, what if that workload was just an anomaly and it's back to some sort of ugly split? With Cook, it's the matchup. With every Buffalo receiver, it's who they are, and how many of the other ones there are. But like there are plenty of guys here. This isn't like a Jets slate where it's like, well, you have Justin Fields and then you have a bunch of guys that they're just not going to throw the ball to. Like there are guys that fully have good games in their range of outcomes, and you're not going to be, if Josh Palmer has a good game, it's not going to be like, if Tyler Johnson had a good game, like you're not really going to bat an eye at it.
It's just difficult to figure out who's going to be. Yeah, exactly. Like we don't know who it's going to be, but somebody is going to probably score some fantasy points here. Also, like I think to your point, that the most important thing is, we're using the full salary cap here, or close to the full salary cap, which means like you actually don't need anybody in this top lineup to outscore Josh Allen. Josh Allen can outscore every single one of them, and this is still the top lineup because you couldn't afford Josh Allen in here. You couldn't, like, James Cook is cheaper than him by enough that like Josh Allen couldn't replace James Cook as the captain, couldn't replace any of the others. So that's how you end up with a lot of lineups that don't have Josh Allen that look really good, even though like he is the one projectable piece where it's like, he's probably going to put up a lot of fantasy points. He could be the leading scorer on the slate and still not be the player you need because of his price tag. Looking at these lineups. So that's
also
a really good point.
Oh, sorry. Another thing, like Josh Allen's price, but also the price of receivers on Buffalo. You don't have quite as, because the Buffalo receivers are mostly cheap, and they're cheap enough that like they can get there on a touchdown and reception volume. It's the correlation with Allen isn't as important going that direction, I don't think. Where like, let's say you have, you're playing a $10,500 receiver from Buffalo, from Buffalo, obviously doesn't exist, but like, let's say you have that, then for them to have a game that like you really want at 10-5, there's a good chance Josh Allen threw them like 2 touchdowns. And now Josh Allen has 2 touchdowns plus whatever else Josh Allen did. With guys like Gabe Davis and Josh Palmer, anybody really that you want to pick from Buffalo, they're cheap enough where if they catch 6 passes and score a touchdown, you probably want them. But if Josh Allen just throws that 1 touchdown, you probably don't want Josh Allen.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting slate from like a pricing dynamic standpoint. Just like they're all like sort of, a lot of players seem like sort of mispriced, but I don't know. Yeah, it's a kind of pick your poison type of slate beyond Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, like clearly the comfiest click, the one that you're like, I know that I'm going to get a certain amount of points out of Josh Allen. But there's a lot of ways that it could go that you get that, and it's still not what you actually want. And a lot of these unknowns, you just need 6 unknowns to get there instead. Kind of fun. On the other side, we have Davis Mills is 9,600. So we have $2,800 difference in price for the starting quarterbacks here. Mills projected for 38% flex ownership, 6% captain ownership. I got to a little bit overweight in the flex, underweight at captain, just like I did with Josh Allen. Is it similar for you with Davis Mills?
Yeah, 5% at captain, which fine. 45% at flex, which is slightly over the 38% projection. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think Davis Mills certainly falls into that category of guys where I'm always like kind of nervous when I look at my exposures for this show, because that like shitty sub 10K quarterback has just shown up so often for me this year. And it's not the most exciting thing. But, on the slate where you do have this mid-range of playmakers that have volatility, that goes both directions. Like, yes, there's a ton of pass catchers that have no floor whatsoever. There's a ton of pass catchers that can go catch 6 passes for 80 yards and a touchdown today. So that, does lower the total appeal of quarterbacks in general. Davis Mills, has been fine from a fantasy standpoint, was very close to a really bad performance in that first start, but then, got it all together, had the rushing touchdown at the end. So he's cheap enough that I think he looks fine, pretty much in line with ownership on him. And one other thing with Josh Allen ownership, like the 42% captain ownership does look high at first glance, but also he's the exact type of guy that you would expect to get steamed a bit also, coming off of a 6 touchdown game last week, and then a slate where you don't have any guys that you're really comfortable clicking other than him.
Yeah. I pulled up schedule adjusted. I wasn't listening to what you just said. I was reading through the coach speak index to see it. Just yeah, it's pretty obvious by my response a lot of the time. Yeah, apologies, but everybody else I'm sure was listening and learned a lot from that. In terms of schedule adjusted, it's tough. I mean, it's kind of tough across the board. Just like the matchups in this game are not ideal. Texans defense allowed the 13th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game over the last 5 weeks to quarterbacks. Bills defense allowed the Davis Mills. Can you hear me right now? My entire screen is frozen. Oh, okay. Hang on a second. There, are we back? We're
Yeah, I wasn't sure which one of us was frozen, but then I thought it was me, so I left.
Oh, okay. I think it might have been me, but I'm not positive. Okay. All right. Yeah. Matt says shit just glitched out. Yeah, we'll just chalk it up too. Yeah, I don't know. As far as stacking goes, Josh Allen, you can play anywhere unstacked. He has 10 rushing touchdowns in 10 games. Davis Mills, I think you need to be stacking him up. He has rushed for over 10 yards per game and has a rushing touchdown on the season. But that's kind of an outlier relative to his career. Do you see it the same way? Like you want to be stacking up Davis Mills, not necessarily Josh Allen?
Yeah, probably. And I mean, I think you're still mostly stacking Josh Allen just because he does have so many cheap receivers that if Josh Allen has, I mean, I guess he doesn't have to have a big game to be in the optimal lineup just because everybody, it could be a 10-6 game or something. But usually like somebody from Buffalo is going to catch enough passes that you want to get there. But from like a skill set standpoint, agree that, he's the kind of guy that you don't have to stack. Mills, I think it is more important looking at lineups that I have Mills at flex. Pretty heavily stacked, obviously pairing him with Nico a lot, but then getting to like a cheaper receiver or tight end or something like that as well.
Okay. So often double stack when he's captain. Arkansas says back says Adam said put some respect on his name before he leaves. I mean, yeah, that's right after I didn't listen to him at all. He leaves. That makes sense. Anything else at quarterback?
No.
All right, let's move on to running backs. Hang on a second. Starting with James Cook. James Cook looking pretty good here, projected for 28% flex, 22% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I got to 54% flex, so way over the field of flex, just 17% of captain, slightly under the field there. Are you seeing similar with James Cook?
James Cook, 59% at flex, 16 at captain. So, a little bit under at captain, over at flex. And I do think it makes sense just in the context of the total player exposures I have right now. Like I wouldn't say, just like with Josh Allen, and we say this a lot, but we always talk in terms of like, oh, I'm getting to this player, I'm not getting to that player. There's a million ways you can play a slate. There's a million different lineups that you expect to be profitable. So it's not generally super important, like overweight, underweight on players. But if you're playing a set of lineups where you are under the field on Josh Allen, like the current set of lineups I have, I would certainly want to, in some way, be getting over the field on some combination of James Cook, Nico Collins, like other guys that can reasonably compete with Josh Allen in terms of fantasy points. I don't want to have some set of lineups that somehow like isn't playing Josh Allen and also isn't playing James Cook and also isn't playing Nico Collins. Like at that point, I don't know how I'm supposed to actually be competing. So it does just make sense. Like if your lineups are light on Josh Allen, you're probably going to be getting a bit more James Cook. I certainly think you can play plenty of good Josh Allen lineups, and it's probably going to cost you some James Cook. But with the way things are projected right now, I'm preferring to get a bit over the field on Cook. You do get some negative correlation there with Allen in the sense of, rushing touchdown equity for Cook. If you get James Cook breaking off long runs, that's bad for Josh Allen, long touchdown runs rather. That's bad for Josh Allen. If you get Cook scoring from the 3, that's bad for Josh Allen. Obviously, there's also the component where if the Bills just manage to score 40 points, that's good for everybody. But you do get, especially in a matchup where you are assuming Houston limits Buffalo somewhat because they're a good defensive team. The more finite touchdowns are, the more you can make the case of, well, what if James Cook gets a goal line touchdown and he houses one, which takes, 5 plays, 6 plays away from Josh Allen, then James Cook suddenly is looking really good and Josh Allen's not. And again, in those like lower scoring games, that's kind of, I think, the narrative for the over the field at flex, under at captain. It's James Cook has a good game, but not necessarily the game. Like the game isn't high scoring enough that maybe you want Cook at captain. Not that, he's a bad play at captain, but I think there is sort of that like negative correlation with Allen as well.
Yeah, I'm just pulling this up because it's like it's not quite as negative over the past couple games. I remembered a Chesley tweet about James Cook being more involved in the passing game, so I was like, do I need to look into that? Has he actually been significantly more involved? He does have 8 targets over the past couple weeks. I don't know if that's a trend that we can expect going forward if he's going to be more involved.
I don't think so. The only reason I say that is it's been volatile this year.
Yeah.
Like if you look at his route, route
participation down in those games relative to the season.
Right. Yeah. Like week 3, 4, 5, 53, 68, 63% route participation. And so then it was just like, oh, wow. Like James Cook is like really stepping into this pass catching role. And then week 6, they had a bye week 7, but week 6 and week 8, you're at 31, 32%. And so then the talking point was the Bills said that they need to, limit James Cook somewhat. They need him healthy in the postseason. They're clearly not giving Ray Davis rushes. So one way they can limit it is less James Cook in the passing game. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. And then they follow that up with 3 weeks of him being basically back in line more or less with his season averages. So like, I think you're kind of just fluctuating, in terms of route participation. And then your targets are just naturally going to fluctuate game to game.
Yeah, I mean, 8 isn't like, it's not like he's been targeted 15 times the past couple games. Like 8 is like a slight
they didn't change
increase.
The offense to like Josh Allen either runs or he throws a 2-yard pass to Cook.
Doesn't seem like a significant enough change to do anything with it. Outside of Cook, Ty Johnson 3,400, Ray Davis 1,400. Ty Johnson projected for 8% flex, none at captain, got to 5%. Ray Davis 1,400 project for 2%. I didn't get to any Ray Davis. Again, if we just look at the past couple games, 2 carries for Ty Johnson, 4 targets on 38.5% route participation, 2 carries for Ray Davis, 2 targets on 4% route participation. What are you doing with the backup running backs here?
1% Ray Davis, 5% Ty Johnson. Ray Davis on the one hand, he is somebody that in theory you thought was going to have standalone value as the RB2 for Buffalo. And obviously that can change at any time where he does start, like he just moves into the role that everybody thought he was going to have this year. But we're in week 12 and it just hasn't happened. I mean, you're getting a better chance of Ray Davis getting 0 carries than, in terms of looking at the first 10 games of the year, however many they played. There's been more times where like Ray Davis just doesn't touch the ball than Ray Davis gets that like 6-7 carry, backup role. Not to say that won't change. And if it does, then immediately you want him at 1,400, but they've shown really no inclination of doing that. Ty Johnson is more expensive. He is at least involved as a pass catcher. He's running a similar number of routes typically to James Cook, 39% route participation last week, 47 the week before that, around 36% average. One thing that is interesting about Ty Johnson, and I guess I just never really noticed it, and then I saw it when I was working on projections earlier and double checked it. Like for a running back, his yards per reception is massive. He's at like 14 yards per catch this year, or 13 yards per catch, something like that. His baseline in our model is like 13 and a half, which I saw it and was just like, oh shit, that's wrong by like 7 yards probably. And yeah, it's not. So he does at least like give you like big play upside for a guy that's going to catch one pass out of the backfield.
Yeah, I mean, Ty Johnson, he's kind of intriguing to me. I can't figure out the like, I always like to play the backup running back angle with the contingent upside. I can't figure out like how much does Ty Johnson's role grow if something were to happen to James Cook, and I would imagine he's not going to be out there if there's a blowout. I would imagine that the blowout scenario at the very least would be Ray Davis. So I don't know what to make of the contingent upside here. It's different than a lot of backfields in that I don't know. I think Ray Davis would get more involved if James Cook got hurt. Probably a split between Ty Johnson and Ray Davis, and then in a blowout, my guess would be it's just Ray Davis at that point. But I'm not positive that that's the case.
I'm pretty confident it's Ray Davis in a blowout. Week 2, you got a 21% rushing market share for Davis. Week 8, you got 26%. I don't actually know what the scores were in those games, but I'm pretty sure they were non-competitive.
That would make sense. Yeah.
And also just from they say they want to get Ray Davis more touches or whatever.
Yeah.
He checks all the boxes for blowout run. The bigger question to me is like, if James Cook gets hurt in the first quarter, what is the running back split then? And I think I agree with you. It's probably some sort of a timeshare, like close to 50-50 split, something like that. Like, I don't think Ty Johnson would just take over as a 3-down back. I think Ray Davis would probably mostly be your first and second down back. Ty Johnson will be your third down pass catching back, and then we get some carries as well. So like, I think that at 1,400 from a blowout / James Cook gets hurt standpoint, Ray Davis is cheap enough that he would look good in those scenarios. Certainly the James Cook gets hurt scenario, and you're getting like, call it 3/4 of Ray Davis. The blowout obviously gets dicey too, where it's like, well, when exactly do they take James Cook off the field? Does Ray Davis get an entire fourth quarter of carries? Does he get 2 drives? What exactly does that look like? But I think that in either of those scenarios, Ray Davis certainly benefits. And I think the marginal benefit is bigger for Ray Davis than for Ty Johnson, because I don't think Ty Johnson benefits in a blowout. And in like the James Cook gets hurt scenario, obviously Ty Johnson benefits, but Ty Johnson's baseline is higher than Ray Davis's. Yeah. So I think the marginal benefit's smaller.
Yeah, no, I think that is spot on. It's always interesting playing the blowout angle, because like we just remember the Cowboys from it. I think that was Monday night with Malik Davis was like my favorite play on the slate. He got a goal line carry in regular time, but then like they were up 3 scores late in the fourth quarter and still just giving it to Javonte Williams. I was like, what is going on here? Why are you giving it to Javonte Williams with 3 minutes left in the game or whatever? So it's like some teams will put in, the backup running back in the fourth quarter of a 3-score game. Other teams, not so much. I don't know what we would expect here. I would think that here they would put in the backups in the fourth quarter, just because the Texans aren't that dangerous. So you would think that they trust their defense and they put in their backups. People in chat seem to think that it would be Ray Davis taking over in the case of an injury, and Ty Johnson keeps his same role, which I think is like close to what we're saying, except I think that Ty Johnson's role also probably grows somewhat. I think you broke it down well though.
Because James Cook is involved as a pass catcher, so
right.
Like that part of James Cook's role is going to Ty Johnson, at least to a large extent, is where I think Ty Johnson's role benefits. But in terms of carries, like I think Ray Davis is taking the bulk of the carries.
Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, and I'm just debating because like I said, I usually like playing these backup running back angles. It's also tougher on a slate like this, where it's just like there are some fairly low owned receivers who just like are going to be involved. Like I think are already going to be running routes and getting some work here. So I'm like, I have lesser interest in the backup running backs where there's so much other value that looks pretty good that they need to beat out. So I don't know to what extent I'm going to play the backup running back angle in this one. On the other side, we have Woody Marks in one of the few spots that like looks good from a matchup standpoint. He is 9,200, projected for 28% flex ownership, 5% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I got to 40% in the flex, 30% at captain. So Woody Marks looking like a smash in the Sims. Is it the same for you?
Sorry, I was telling chat they're stupid.
Of course.
I didn't hear what you said.
Are you getting into a lot of Woody Marks?
Yeah, I'm getting to too much, and this one concerns me, but at the same time, I'm kind of okay with it. So right now, only projected for 28% flex ownership, 5% captain, which I think is really low based on what we've seen in the last couple of weeks. And so I'm getting to 40% at flex, but also 30% at captain. It doesn't feel good in that it's Woody Marks and the Texans offense, and he's a running back and they're, 6-point dogs, etc. But he's dominated carries the last couple of weeks, and we haven't gotten any indication that that's going to change. It seems like he has just taken the job from Nick Chubb. They've gone from sort of like a timeshare where it was alternating every couple of weeks to like 65% rushing market share 2 weeks ago, 70 plus last week. The thing that really stands out to me, though, is like when you think of Woody Marks and Nick Chubb, and Einsteinian just mentioned it in chat, not to say that like this won't be the case today. Obviously, things can change, but when you think of Nick Chubb, you think of Woody Marks. You think of Woody Marks as like the passing down back, kind of shifty, like more elusive runner. Nick Chubb is the guy that's just going to go stand, score from the 2-yard line. But the last 2 weeks where Woody Marks has gotten the bulk of the carries, there have been 3 running back carries inside the 5, all Woody Marks. There have been 6 running back carries inside the 10, all Woody Marks. So again, 2-game sample, like it can be different this week, but Woody Marks taking on the bulk of the rushing workload, it hasn't been, he's getting most of the carries between the 10-yard, from 10-yard line to 10-yard line. Like he's just getting the carries. He's been the guy inside the 10. He's been the guy inside the 5. And if that continues, like he just looks really good. Also, if you go, using schedule adjusted fantasy points, this is one of the only good matchups that you have on, in this game. Buffalo for the season has been a top 5 schedule adjusted fantasy points to running backs on the ground for the season, for the last 5 games, still top 5. So that looks good. They have been a tough matchup for running backs out of the backfield, which like Marks does give you some passing game involvement. But I think big case for Woody Marks here is just that he seemingly has taken on a legitimate running back 1 role for Houston.
Adam, can you see my screen right now?
It's blurry, but yes.
Oh, you can see like what I'm sharing on my screen?
Pornhub?
That's funny. I can't see anything right now. So in my StreamYard,
So
from what I see,
is that why you think I'm lying?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. It's so weird. I literally cannot see the screen that I'm sharing right now, but then I'm going to mute myself right now and tell me if it changes when I mute. So just right now.
Yeah, now it's not blurry and you're muted. So everything's good.
How about now? It's
blurry
like,
and you're talking.
I can't see it unless I'm muted. When I'm muted, the screen pops back up. When I turn my sound on, the screen goes away. This not as big of an issue when you are on the screen with me. This would be a huge issue for me like later on when I'm trying to do a show without you and I have to talk the whole time. Yeah, this is very, very strange. I might refresh. So I might leave the studio and come back, or maybe I'll get rid of the screen for now. But yeah, Woody Marks, as you said, one of the few places where we actually have a good matchup here. You would think that they are going to want to run more against the Bills, where like you want to keep the Bills offense off the field. Yeah, it's a good spot for Woody Marks. They also they talked about getting the rookies more involved a couple of weeks ago. There was some coach speak, which I was going to go find, but I'm too distracted.
Yeah, like
they really have.
Yeah. Like not to the same extent, Higgins hasn't just like completely replaced Kirk and Noel hasn't completely replaced anybody, but like they have the rookie wide receivers have played a bigger role, and then Woody Marks is just taken over. Like to put in context, the rushing market share for Woody Marks the last couple of games, again with the caveat of can change at any time, but also there's no real reason to think Nick Chubb is going to reemerge. Woody Marks, in terms of the percentage of carries he's getting, like he's in the ballpark with James Cook, Josh Jacobs, guys like that are getting around, 65, 75%. I mentioned it on a previous show that like over the course of an entire season, nobody really averages out at higher than like a 70% rushing market share when you include quarterback carries. So, you'll get some individual games where injuries make you project like 75%, something like that. But like Woody Marks the last couple games has gotten as big a rushing market share as like you're really ever going to project for a running back.
Yeah. I am going to leave and come back and see if this works because I'm still having the same issue. So if you can talk about Nick Chubb while I'm gone, I will be back in just a minute.
Yeah. So Nick Chubb, 3,200 projected for 11% ownership at flex. I'm only getting 4% right now. And that obviously just goes hand in hand with how I am projecting Woody Marks. I think this is a spot where, there is room for you to adjust projections, whether it's Run the Sims or anybody else, because obviously Nick Chubb and Woody Marks are directly correlated in terms of their opportunities. And you do have a shifting backfield in Houston. So if you I'm higher than market on carries for Woody Marks, for example, because I do just buy into what they've done the last couple of weeks. If you are somebody that is more inclined to not as aggressively buy into what we've seen, then you're going to take a couple of carries away from Marks, and those are going to go to Chubb, and he's going to look a little bit better. Also, in terms of how you're projecting rushing touchdowns, like I said, over the last 2 weeks, 6 carries inside the 10, all going to Marks, 3 inside the 5, all going to Marks. Not that you're projecting 100% of rushing touchdowns to go to Woody Marks, but if you think that long term Nick Chubb is actually going to end up being the goal line back, then you're going to project him a little bit higher. But that isn't, what we've seen. So it all just goes hand in hand. Obviously, if I am very bullish on Woody Marks' role, I'm going to be more bearish on Nick Chubb's role than probably the industry in general.
Yep, I think that does make sense. I still got to 10% in the flex, projected for 11%. Were you similar, or did you have far off from what I'm getting?
I have 4, I think.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I'm going back and forth on what I want to do with Nick Chubb. It is like you said, it's a better matchup for running backs on the ground than it is through the air. It's a pretty negative matchup through the air, really positive matchup on the ground. So that obviously benefits Nick Chubb's skill set. So maybe they just make the pie bigger, run it more, and in which case you could benefit Nick Chubb. But the workload has just really not been there for Nick Chubb over the past couple of weeks. Just 8 carries. He does have 3 targets on 10% rep participation. So I'm sort of torn on what I want to do with Nick Chubb.
And also, I mean, to your point about, and it's a Nick Chubb point, also a Woody Marks point. This is kind of a weird spot too, from a standpoint of, Houston is 6-point dogs. They're, you think about Buffalo, and it's you think about playing Buffalo as a near touchdown underdog. And I think the first thought is always immediately oh, well, what if they just have to abandon the run, which obviously could happen if Josh Allen just goes out there and balls out. But Houston is a very good defensive team. And also they have a backup quarterback playing. They would love to keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. This is a team that actually runs a lot of plays too. In the 2 games that Davis Mills has been quarterback, it's 64 and 67 plays. But then even going back to prior weeks, 68 plays, 75 plays, they actually run a lot of plays total. So there is, I think, this possibility. And then also, it's been relatively easy to run on Buffalo compared to anything else. You could, from a strategic standpoint, be coming into this game saying, okay, if we just can run the ball somewhat effectively, we keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. We keep Buffalo from scoring. We control the clock. We run more plays. You can lose by 6 points, the spread. And if it's 21 to that's a stupid 21 to 15. I mean, obviously not the most likely actual scores, but a low scoring game like that where Houston kind of dominates the clock, but Buffalo just scores 3 touchdowns and Houston doesn't get in the end zone, whatever. You could just get a bigger rushing pie for Houston than you would normally expect from a team that is a 6-point dog against a good offense because of Houston's defense being good.
Yeah, it's been weird that they have in the 2 starts for Davis Mills, the Texans rank 7th in terms of pass rate over expectation, which is kind of mind-boggling. You would not expect the backup to come in and suddenly they're just throwing it constantly. Actually, I didn't look at what it was prior to him joining, so maybe they've always been a high pass rate over expectation team.
I think it's a little bit lower. I didn't look at pass rate over expectation, but I know they only have a 34% rushing percentage over the last 2 games. But remember, the first game, they were getting their asses kicked right out of the gate and had to play from behind. But for the season, they're like 37, 38% rushing percentage. And then last 2 games are at 34. So we haven't seen like a big drop, especially considering that they were forced to throw more 2 games ago.
Yeah, I actually don't know exactly what pass rate over expectation takes into account. I would think that it takes into account like game script, so like that would account for like the fact that they were playing from behind the entire game. Regardless, I think that it's like we have such a small sample size with Davis Mills, and this is a game where it just like would make more sense, I think, for them to run it quite a bit on the Bills. So I do like the angle of playing it like they're going to run a lot. As Belkowski says, if you've been playing backup running back every slate, Chubb versus the Bills has to be your holy grail. That is kind of true. Like this is like the ultimate spot to play the backup running back.
It's the problem for me is that I think the number 1 running back is just going completely ignored.
Yeah, that is part of the issue, and then it's also all the other value on the slate. So like the combination of like Woody Marks looks great, and then also we have a billion receivers in that same price range that we can play who are like probably going to be just as involved and like more involved as a pass catcher, which is more valuable. So it's a spot. I'll give some thought to playing more of Nick Chubb, but right now I'm getting like right with the field, which seems fine.
Yeah, and to Ted's point in chat, he said, I feel like Marks is a little too expensive. I think that's going to be the consensus opinion, and it's not that I think it's wrong in the sense that he does feel too expensive, because he's over 9K, and for most of the season, he's been in a really ugly timeshare with Nick Chubb, and he's running behind a shitty offensive line, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, if you kind of just like strip the names out of it, and if this is with the caveat that like if you buy into this is Woody Marks' backfield now, based on the split we've seen in the last couple of weeks, and the fact that Nick Chubb is inefficient and sucks, and like it logically makes sense for Woody Marks to be elevating. If you do buy into this is just Woody Marks' backfield now, would you be looking at a Chase Brown 9,200 and saying he's too expensive, or Josh Jacobs 9,200 saying he's too expensive? Like you'd be jamming him in everywhere, especially if he's getting like 30% combined ownership.
Yeah, I mean the ownership looks great on Woody Marks. 16 carries per game, couple targets per game the past couple of weeks, so like pretty strong workload. And who knows, maybe that even continues to elevate, especially in a matchup where it would make a ton of sense for them to run. So yeah, I think Woody Marks. I'm with you. He just looks too cheap for the role. And
Ted said it too. He said it may lower his ownership by 15%. Somebody had mentioned it earlier too. Like, do we think that Woody Marks gets steamed because of I think Sean Tucker's game last week? I feel relatively confident that Woody Marks' ownership is going to stay in check, because if you just project like to his prop market, he comes in a couple fantasy points lower than I have right now. Because again, I'm just a little bit higher on his carries. So there's that. But then, also there is going to be sticker shock. Like it's going to be tough for people to actually want to click $9,200 Woody Marks because of, just all the reasons that you would be hesitant to click $9,200 Woody Marks. So like, yeah. I think that I can at least feel relatively confident that if Woody Marks does maintain the role that I think Woody Marks now has, I'm probably getting him at an ownership discount for that role.
Yeah, no, I think that is accurate. All right, behind Woody Marks and Nick Chubb, Daria Gumbawale, British Brooks, man, Damian Pierce. Why did I draft that guy in best ball, Adam? Everybody, they were talking about him like he could be the starter. I knew, like I projected as though I thought Joe Mixon was going to miss the entire season.
Yeah,
got that exactly right. And then I just the one that I didn't get to was Woody Marks. I was like, all right, I'm going to draft Damian Pierce. I'll draft a little bit of Nick Chubb, and then I actually got to a little bit of Woody Marks, but he was, I think, my third most of that trio, which feels like a huge mistake.
I have Woody Marks. Like I'm over the field on Woody Marks. I have Damian Pierce on on Underdog. I don't know that I have him at all on DraftKings, but I have him on Underdog because by the time I was drafting Underdog, Woody Marks had moved from, like round 18 to round 13, 14, whatever. And then Damian Pierce is just like not getting drafted. And I was like, well, I'm not drafting Nick Chubb. Like that's not what I'm doing at all. And so it's just like, okay, well, I'll start taking some shots on Damian Pierce. It was basically once I think I started getting him once Chris Rodriguez moved from like round 18 to round 16. And it was like, oh, well, I'm not getting Chris Rodriguez every single draft. So now I'll just start mixing in Damian Pierce's. That obviously has not worked.
I'm looking at my dollars spent on the running backs, and I have $822 spent on Dameon Pierce, $724 on Nick Chubb, only $426 on Woody Marks. That also includes rookies and sophomores, which probably accounts for like 100 of that. And then Joe Mixon, I do have 544. So there was a period of the summer before we knew that he was probably not going to play that I was drafting him. And then there was also a period where it was like, oh, he's going in the 18th round, and like we don't know for sure that he's going to miss. So I took some. It was just I played this whole back. I should have just not drafted the backfield at all, to be honest.
Underdog, I have 0% Mixon. I have 7% Marks. I have like 16% Pierce, or sorry, 21% Pierce.
Jeez,
But then I think DraftKings, I have something like 12% Marks and probably no Pierce.
We got duped on Dameon Pierce by some of the reports coming out that he might be the starter, and nobody was drafting him. Anyway, are you getting to any Agumbawale or British Brooks?
I hope not.
British Brooks scored a touchdown a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, he scored a touchdown, and then somebody else named
like Britain something similar name.
But no, I'm not getting to Agumbawale or British Brooks.
0 total carries for them, 0 routes run in the past 2 weeks. So I think that makes sense. All right, let's move on to wide receivers. We can start with the Texan side, which is, I think, slightly easier to break down. We've got Nico Collins is the clear one for the Texans. So we can start there. He's 11,200, projected for 33% flex, 9% captain ownership. I got to 32% flex, 16% captain. So well over the field at captain, right with the field in the flex. How much you get into of Nico Collins?
Yeah, 34 flex, 15 captain. So a little bit over at captain, right around the field at flex. I mean, he looks good. He's expensive at 11-2, but clearly the number one receiver. He has been productive in 2 games with Davis Mills. Whether that continues, who knows? But clearly wide receiver 1 here. Also just, very good. It's not like this is a de facto wide receiver 1. It's not, not to take anything away from Shakir, but it's not the Bills where it's just like, well, Shakir is the 1, but like really none of them are a 1. Like clearly Nico Collins is really, really good. He's the best wide receiver in this game, hands down. And again, like Davis Mills' presence hasn't killed him so far. So I think Nico looks fine.
I don't know what sample to use here because Davis Mills played most of the game in week 9, so I could include, but let's just look at the usage over the past couple weeks, because I think this is the past couple weeks the most indicative of the usage we can expect for the Texans, because I think it was also like the rookies have taken on or at least Higgins has taken on a bigger role the past couple weeks after some positive coach speak. But in those 2 weeks with Davis Mills starting playing the whole game, 24 targets for Nico Collins, 84.4% route participation. Like you said, really strong role. Also a very good receiver. Tough to argue with Nico Collins being a priority here. Not a great matchup, which is kind of the theme of the day almost across the board. We don't have a ton of great matchups. It is the 5th worst matchup for receivers against Buffalo, and I don't see one positive matchup for any of the receiver positions here. So kind of tough to get from a matchup standpoint, but looks like a very strong play here. Beyond Nico Collins, it gets dicier with Jalen Noel is 1,600, Christian Kirk 2,800, Jaden Higgins 4,600, Xavier Hutchinson 3,000. If we look at the route share report for the Texans receivers, you can see that Xavier Hutchinson seems to be kind of his role has been declining week over week since the bye week. Every single week it has gone down in terms of the route participation. Christian Kirk kind of losing some of his role as well, not quite as much. Jaden Higgins seems to be increasing his role week over the past few weeks. Jalen Noel, I don't know, kind of steady. So we're, you make what you want of the role changes here. But over the course of those 2 games with Davis Mills, 14 targets for Jaden Higgins, 7 for Christian Kirk, 5 for Hutchinson, 5 for Noel. What are you making of these? They basically don't have a wide receiver 2. I kind of read this as like they don't have a wide receiver 2, and then they have 4 wide receiver 3s, which is kind of tough. What are you doing with the other receivers on the Texans?
Yeah, so like in a spot like this, I'm really inclined. I think you are or should be more sensitive to 1, pricing, and 2, ownership. And really that's what's showing up for me right now. Like if you were to make ownership steady across those 4 guys, then and pricing, relatively similar, then I think theoretically I would want pretty similar exposures to them because they all project very similarly. In terms of route participation, I think, obviously I agree with everything you said because none of it was even an opinion, but like you're expecting around 50% route participation for Kirk and for Higgins. For Hutchinson, you're expecting probably like 55 to 60%, somewhere in that range for Higgins. And then you're expecting like 35-ish% for Knoll. But with the ownership projections right now, I'm basically jamming Knoll. And this comes back to, I think, how you play DFS from a strategy standpoint, like what you want to do, because you can make the case that, none of these guys are super likely to be optimal. 13% chance of Kirk being optimal, 12% chance of Knoll being optimal, 13% chance of Higgins being optimal, 8% chance of Hutchinson being optimal. So you could certainly just like play them flat, play them in line with that. But if you're going to play more exploitive style, right now, again, obviously can change between now and lock, but 2% projected ownership to Jalen Knoll at 1,600. So he's the cheapest of the group. He's the lowest owned, and he has a similar projection to everybody else. Like, yeah, he's going to run fewer routes most likely, but his projection is still, like a point and a half lower than anybody else. So I have 25% of him, and then I only have like 3% of Higgins, Kirk, Hutchinson. So really, it depends like how you want to play as far as if you're going to play closer to optimal rates and spread out your exposure across that group, or if you're going to say, look, I think the field is most wrong on Jalen Knoll, and so I'm going to just have Jalen Knoll lineups and hope that this is a Jalen Knoll game.
I think that makes sense from a how you're going to play the DFS from a DFS theory perspective. Do you think there's any chance that this is like a real role increase for Jaden Higgins? I mean, 7 targets per game over the past 2 weeks, only 51% route participation, but that would be the one that I'm looking at. And it's like, if he is ascending to become that wide receiver 2, then he looks too cheap at 4,600. So then he's the other one that I'm like, I'm much more tempted by Higgins than I am even Kirk, but certainly Hutchinson to me looks like kind of the one that I'm the least interested of the group. I don't know. Do you think there's any chance that that's real and that he's just like too cheap for a wide receiver 2 role?
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, if you look at the 2 games he's played with Mills full time. So for the season, Higgins is at 0.18 targets per route run. In those 2 games with Mills, he's at 0.29. And again, like not to say that like you're obviously not expecting that to continue, but one, you have a different quarterback than he's had for the entire season, and suddenly he's getting peppered with targets. But 2, and this is the one that I think is probably a bit stickier, he's a rookie receiver, and he's just playing a bigger role now in terms of he's on the field more, but he's also earning targets. And when you consider that earning targets is a skill, like obviously you're gonna get more targets the less competition you have, but also it is a skill as far as getting open, getting targets. It's reasonable to think that he's just gotten better as the year has gone on. So like I would expect that the truth is somewhere in the middle of the 0.29 that he's got in the last 2 weeks and the 0.18 he's at for the season, just kind of probably landing somewhere in like that 0.21, 0.22 range. And that is more productivity than you've gotten this season. So yeah, I do think that even like, I mean, there's some chance that this is just the game where like Hutchinson disappears and Higgins runs 80% of routes. Like that could happen. But even if that doesn't happen, I think there's a real chance that like Higgins is just better and targeted at a higher rate than he has been earlier in the year.
Yeah, and on top of the being a rookie receiver that you expect to get better throughout the year, he's also you kind of have the backup narrative of the backup quarterback. Like you often see the backup quarterback, they practice all the time with the backup receivers, and like Higgins is a starter now, but he was a backup for most of the season. So it's possible that Davis Mills just has a lot of reps with Jaden Higgins, trusts him. So there is like, that's the one that I'm like, I think that I'm going to boost it at least a little bit. Like I think you're right from the like Jalen Knoll not getting a ton of ownership, and he's also been targeted, on limited routes, and he also has that going for him, the potential backup angle. Only 31% routes, but 5 targets, same number as Xavier Hutchinson over the past 2 weeks. But I think Higgins, like the rookies are the ones that I'm most inclined to get to of the Houston receivers. Kirk, like, man, that's just too much ownership. The $2,800 price tag is obviously pretty enticing for Kirk. We'll see if the ownership changes, but it's tough to get there at 34%.
Yeah, there's a couple of issues with Kirk, I think, and and again, if ownership flattens out, like, yeah, he's cheap and certainly could be the guy that you want. His yards per reception are way down this year as well. He's only at like 9 yards per reception. He's running routes around 50-ish% of the time. So you kind of have those things where, again, if ownership is flat, then it's like, yeah, those things aren't ideal, but it's a 1-game sample and he's going to be on the field 50% of the time or so. And we know that, he can be a productive receiver. But when he's getting that much ownership, when the field is just saying like Christian Kirk is clearly the guy, that you want here, then I think it becomes more important to be like, okay, well, he's getting 9 yards per catch. That's not really what you're looking for. He's not getting targeted that much. He's, at 0.15 targets per route run in these 2 games with Davis Mills. That's behind Knoll. It's way behind Collins and Higgins. It's behind Schultz, who's been targeted a lot. It's like, okay, well, there's all these things working against him. Like, why are we sure that he's just like the guy that is most mispriced here?
Yeah, no, I think that is spot on. It's risky. It's pretty scary to only have 2% of the slot demon. I mean, you got to play some of the slot demon, but yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense what we're getting in the Sims with Christian Kirk. On the other side, we have a much more dicey receiver group, I think, to some extent. And I'm happy to see that it's largely coming in how I want it to come in with these receivers. I think we start with Shakir he is the wide receiver 1 here. He is 8,000 projected for 35% flex, 4% cap and ownership. I listed him in the expert survey as a player I expect to be most underweight to the field. That appears to be what I'm getting in the Sims. 18% flex, 3% captain on Shakir. Sounds like it's pretty similar for you.
Yeah. Like on the one hand, I do think, 8K quote, de facto wide receiver 1 for Josh Allen. Like that's all nice. But even last week, and, maybe he runs maybe he's on the field more this week, certainly possible. But even last week, where you didn't have Keon Coleman, you still only had like 70% route participation for Shakir. They're still primarily just using him in the slot. He's getting targeted on a per route basis, but it's not like a crazy amount. You're talking about like 0.24 or something targets per route run. 67% route participation last week. He was at 84, which was second highest mark of the season in week 10. But prior to that, 77, 64. Like for the season, he's averaging around 75%. So like he's going to be out there, but he's not a wide receiver 1 in the sense of he's running 90% of routes or anything like that. He's generally not somebody that's making huge plays either. So like I think he's a fine play. I think the ownership is probably a little high, but yeah, I'm not getting to much of him right now. I have 17% at flex, which is like half the field. I have 3% at captain. If that came up a little bit, fine. But at the same time, I don't mind just mixing and matching the much cheaper Bills receivers and then, prioritizing from a skill player standpoint, Cook, Collins, Marks as the guys that I'm actually spending on.
Yeah. Alan S says Shakir DNP Monday through Wednesday personal baby narrative. I didn't know. See, he just had a baby. That's gonna be so annoying when Josh Allen targets him 15 times because he had a baby, wants to get him that touchdown. 5.9 targets per game.
Baby narrative work out?
Yeah, it's a good point. A little different though when you're the quarterback, like you have to have the ball, and it depends on how good you are. Whereas if you are a receiver, you're just going to get the ball a lot more. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems too expensive to me for 5.9 targets per game, 72% route participation. Obviously can get there on like scoring touchdowns. He's really strong in terms of yards after the catch. So the short ADOT, not necessarily a huge negative, as was pointed out by Insanium. The low ADOT doesn't concern me too much in this matchup if I'm under the assumption that the Bills front 7 kind of dominates this game. Yeah, I don't know. Just like he is he's a strong yak guy. Like I feel like I've been in on him on like every Bills Showdown slate up until now. It's just like now he's 8,000 and getting a fair amount of ownership. And at this point, it's like, I don't know, that seems expensive for his like median outcome. So if he's going to get a lot of ownership, tough for me to be too enthusiastic about it. So like not a huge fade for me, but yeah, somebody I anticipate being underweight on for sure.
He's kind of in like a dead zone, for lack of a better phrase, from a projection standpoint. Like Yeah, he's a little he is less expensive than the top 5 guys, Allen, Cook, Marks, Collins, Mills, but there's a drop off. There's like a 3.5 to 4 point drop from Davis Mills to Shakir. And then there's only like a 2 to 3 point drop from Shakir to Schultz, defenses, kickers, etc., that are, a few $1,000s less expensive. So I think it's when you consider how much ownership he's getting, I think that's what's kind of kicking him out of lineups for me. It's not so much anything about Shakir. It's just like I can get, especially when you factor in range of outcomes and, volatility on cheap receivers and everything. It's like I can get pretty similar production for like half the price. Yeah, more volatility, less quote unquote certainty, because you can be relatively confident that Shakir is going to catch a few passes and, get at least like 30, 40 yards. But I can just make lineups that from a volatility standpoint aren't really that different than the lineups that have Shakir, and they have, more access to those expensive players.
I think the only reason that I'm like hesitant about this is because of that Dalton Kincaid game where I forget what week it was, but there was some week where it's like, okay, Dalton Kincaid's getting targeted like 5 times per game, isn't making like big plays. He's only running 50% of routes, and he was like 8,000. And I was like, and he came in at like 35% ownership. I called him like sort of a bad play at 20% ownership. And then he came in at 35% ownership and suddenly saw like 6 targets in the first half. And just like out of nowhere, it's like, oh shit. Okay. Well, I guess the field had it right. And this feels like a spot where it's like, it wouldn't be that surprising if Shakir suddenly sees like, there's just so much volatility in like when he gets his targets. So I'm like slightly nervous to call him the worst play on the slate. So it just feels like he could just out of nowhere have a big game, but
I don't think he's a bad play. It's just not one that I'm really getting to. Like maybe, I mean, this could even be like a Josh Allen related thing. Like if I'm playing more Josh Allen and that's going to cost me some combination of Cook, Nico, Marks from a salary standpoint, then I probably do get more Shakir, because like you have obviously correlation between Shakir and Allen, but also, if I'm going from Nico plus Marks, like if I'm turning Nico into Allen, I need to cut some salary, and maybe I'm going from like Marks down to Shakir. So I mean it's all interrelated in that way too. Like if you're playing more Allen lineups, you're probably also playing more Shakir lineups.
Yeah, I mean at the end of the day, like I think it is good process to be underweight here without fully fading. Beyond Shakir, so it's a little bit strange looking at the Buffalo receiver room, because last week we had Elijah Moore was a healthy scratch. Keon Coleman was a healthy scratch. This week we have Curtis Samuel is out for the game. Mecole Hardman is out for the game. So you're opening up 4 targets, 50% route participation with those two. It sounds like Coleman is going to be out again. We don't know that for sure. Like he's not hurt. It's just that's what the rumor is that Keon Coleman going to miss this game as well. So kind of assuming that Elijah Moore is going to be in for this game. But Tyrell Shavers, 5 targets last week on 37.5% route participation. Josh Palmer last week. So Palmer is 4,200 in that game. Josh Palmer was 5 targets on 47% route participation. Gabe Davis, 4 targets on 44% route participation. It's just a lot of like nobody really standing out from either a targets or route participation standpoint. And now we add in Elijah Moore to the mix. What are you doing with these secondary, tertiary receivers on the Bills beyond Shakir?
So I'm playing 3 of them like 15% of the time a piece, and then I'm jamming one of them. So Josh Palmer, 4,200. I like. I think he's like an interesting play in the sense that, one, they're obviously, if we assume Keon Coleman's not playing, then they are short an outside receiver. Khalil Shakir is your slot guy. So you're opening up a lot of routes just like you had last week with Coleman out. But Palmer, was coming back from a 4-week absence last week, about 48% route participation. I think there's a good chance that you see increased routes for Palmer this week compared to last week. Now, whether that's 55, 60%, which I think is the best guess, it could be 75, and then he looks even better. He's cheap at 4,200. It is, relatively likely that Allen is under a lot of pressure, has trouble getting the ball down the field, etc. But you could make a case, the bull argument for Palmer would be that he is somebody that could easily see a pretty significant bump in route participation this week compared to last week, given that it's a second week back from injury. And if Keon Coleman is inactive, they are 1 wide receiver short shorter than they were last week. Granted, Hardman only ran like 10% of routes, but that would be like the case for Palmer, but he's also projected for 30% ownership. So I only got to 15. Shavers, 2,400, getting 15% ownership. I got to 15. He's another outside receiver, probably gonna, run something similar to what he did last week. Last couple of weeks, he was at 42, 44%. I think he's probably like 50, 55% this week. Again, just as a result of being one wide receiver short. And then you have Gabe Davis, who again is a question mark in the sense that he can run these outside routes. He ran 45% last week in his first week with the team. Does he jump to 65% this week? Does he stay around 45%? I think best guess is that he stays around 45%, but you certainly could get a bump. He's only projected for 9% ownership right now, though, at 3,800. I got to 15%, so a little bit over the field. The guy that I have the biggest stand on right now, though, at 15% projected ownership is 1K Elijah Moore. And the reason for that is he's been inactive at times this year. He's been active at times this year. He's generally had some role, though, when he's been active. You had, week 1, he only ran 13% of routes. But week 2, 41%, week 3, 28%, 25% week 4, then he was inactive, 23% week 6, 52, 37, 36 in weeks 8 through 10, then he was inactive. And then, you have Curtis Samuel inactive here, which does open up routes. So, I think Elijah Moore is probably running 35, 40% of routes, something like that. He hasn't been the guy where when he's active, they just don't put him on the field, period. He's either been on the field a decent amount for the most part, or he's been inactive. So I do think that he's relatively likely to be out there a decent amount. He's only 1K. He's not getting that much ownership. Certainly, could be wrong there. Like Elijah Moore runs 15%, Davis runs 60, Palmer runs 65. And, that obviously wouldn't be ideal. You're still not drawing dead at 1K. But, I think there's a pretty decent chance that Moore is running a similar amount, less, but similar amount of routes to these other Bills wide receivers.
Yeah, I in my expert survey, we get asked who's the one player who's going to make the biggest impact on your portfolio. And I wrote up Elijah Moore as that player just because of the price tag. And like you said, it's like, yeah, he's not always used. He's been healthy scratch, I think, more than once this season. But when he's out there, they do use him a bit. They use him in interesting ways. He also has 6 carries, I think, on the season. Has not played every game. So they're trying to get him the ball in unique ways. Certainly could score a touchdown, and he's just 1,000 and not getting a ton of ownership. I think this is actually we have him at 16% ownership here. That's higher than I've seen, I think, elsewhere for Elijah Moore. Maybe not by that much. So yeah, it just stands out from he's not going to get a ton of usage, but he's similar to a Kavonte Turpin, where it's he's probably not going to run a ton of routes, but when he does get out there, they like to get him the ball, and so he's just 1,000. Not getting a ton of ownership. People are going to be scared off by that healthy scratch. He's not going to be in the box score from last week, not going to show up as running any routes. They're just kind of out of mind. So yeah, I think Elijah Moore looks like a really strong play as the cheapest of these Buffalo receivers. Anything else? What do you think the chances are that Keon Coleman plays? And if he does, I don't know. Do we need to play Keon Coleman if he's active?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what his price is.
I don't either.
But yeah, I mean, so Keon Coleman, the same source that said he was going to be inactive last week is the one that said he would be inactive this week.
Yeah.
But the thing that I do question it there, and you do see this happen a lot. I'm assuming he doesn't play, but you're getting all these different sources being Keon Coleman likely to be inactive. They're all quoting the same one source.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's not Pro Football Talk or whatever isn't reporting that Keon Coleman's inactive. If you actually click what they said, it's, hey, this one person said that Keon Coleman's inactive. So everybody's just quoting this one guy who, he was right last week, but who knows? And they have 2 wide receivers inactive this week that were active last week. You replace one of them with Moore. They're either playing a wide receiver down this week or they're playing Coleman. So I don't know, but obviously you'll find that out plenty ahead of time anyway.
Yeah, I also did you watch the clip of Tyrell Shavers was on the Up and Adams, K Adams show this morning. And I guess it kind of sounded to me like he was going to be they didn't say he was going to be out this week. She referenced he was inactive last week, and Tyrell Shavers just kind of things are not going his way right now. So based on that, I'm All right, that seems to like support the possibility that he's going to miss this game as well. I assume you have alerts on for K Adams.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I do think that it looks likely that he is going to miss this game again. Yeah. So at 5,400 is the price tag. I'll cross that bridge if we get there. Like he's not at a price tag where it's like you need to play him if he's active, but like he would obviously be in play.
Yeah, I mean, if he's active, you are taking routes away from. If he's active and starting, I mean that's the whole other conversation, I guess, too. Is like if he's active, so that they're not risking being really shorthanded at wide receiver if somebody gets hurt. But he's going to be wide receiver 6. If he's active and you assume like playing a normal role, then you're taking outside routes away from some combination of Palmer, Shavers, Davis, Moore. Like Shakir's keeping his normal role. Coleman's not like a super target dominant guy. None of these guys are outside of, sort of Shakir, but not really. So you're just throwing like another guy into the mix, but taking routes away from everybody else.
Yeah. Let's move on. Okay. Just your response was like
very, very vaguely, but I know who she is.
Yeah. Okay. Tight ends. We can start with the Texan side, I guess. Dalton Schultz, 6,400, 32% projected flex ownership, 2% projected captain ownership. Using those numbers, I only got to 20% flex ownership, 1% captain ownership. This is a spot where I'm tempted to like get to 6% Dalton Schultz captain. I'm curious if you have given any thought to Dalton Schultz as a potential captain option, just based on his usage the past couple weeks with Davis Mills. I kind of wonder if he's better than he looks on paper. What is your level of interest in Dalton Schultz?
Yeah, I do think there's kind of like some hidden upside or hidden volatility here. Just kind of, like we were saying with Higgins and Nico, like you assume that over a larger sample, the offense is not just going to be better with Davis Mills than with CJ Stroud, but you've seen the ball really just funneled to Collins, Schultz, and Higgins in these 2 starts for Davis Mills. So I do think you can make the case for bumping Dalton Schultz a bit, thinking that he gets targeted a little bit more than he has been, over the course of the season, or, that median projections are going to suggest. And it does make him, an interesting unowned captain. I think he's a perfectly fine play at either position. I'm not getting a ton of it right now because I haven't made that bump. But I think it's a perfectly reasonable one if you wanted to. I'm only getting 20% at flex, 1% at captain. I do think it's something that maybe I'll adjust a little bit between now and lock, just, to account for there is, a different quarterback that through 2 games is very much focusing on 3 guys.
Yeah, 20 targets through 2 games on 75% rep participation. We got Cade Stover back in the last game for the Texans. Was not targeted, but did run 15% of the routes. I don't know if we're going to expect that to cut into Schultz at all, but seems unlikely just given.
Yeah, I think he's just Harrison Bryant.
Yeah, I think that is likely accurate. He is 600 projected for 1% flex ownership, 2%. I got to 2% using that 1% number for Cade Stover. I actually drafted him in a best ball or 2 this summer because because he he was a guy that they seem to really like him. And I think he's like a pretty talented receiving tight end. He just got hurt before, like in week 1, he got hurt. So he's been out the entire season. So obviously, and I don't think that Dalton Schultz is like especially talented.
Yeah, see, this is where you best ball people lose me. You know what I did? I drafted 17th round Dalton Schultz instead of drafting Cade Stover.
I mean, I have, I guess I have 2 shares of Cade Stover across 1,220 drafts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right, sure.
Yeah. 64 shares of Dalton Schultz. So yeah, to be clear, I didn't only draft Cade Stover. I think he's like a talented tight end who was going completely undrafted in 20 round drafts. So it's like, all right, I'll take a couple shares.
That is like the quintessential like best ball bro thing though, would be like, I think the backup tight end on this team is good and I can get him in the 18th round. So I'm going to do that instead of the guy that plays ahead of him that I can also get in the 18th round.
Yeah. No, I hear you. To be clear, it was not like a huge priority for me, but I think that he's a talented backup tight end behind a top tight end who is not all that good. So I thought there was a chance that he just takes on a big role and then obviously has contingent upside also. Anyway, enough about Cade Stover and best ball. He's 600. I got 2%. How much you get into of Cade Stover?
I actually have 1% Schultz on underdog. I thought I had more. I don't think I'm getting to Stover.
Okay.
I have 1% Stover, 600, touchdown equity, I guess.
Yeah. Schultz, yeah. If I were using an optimizer, I would try to get to more at captain, specifically. Like I think he's a fine flex play, but like I'm really more interested at captain just from the standpoint of like could have 8 receptions in the game and then he's throwing a touchdown and suddenly he looks awesome.
Yeah, I think that like guys like that, it's I don't know. I think it's hard to like articulate, and I don't even know for sure if it's right because it's not like I've like tried to model it or sim it or anything. But like my first inclination is guys like that, Schultz, even like Jaden Higgins in this example, where or like even kind of Woody Marks, where like you have these big deltas on like what their role or opportunities have been for the season and what it could be given some circumstance change, in this case the quarterback change. Like you act like you can maximize being right early by like putting them at captain, sort of is like the way I'm thinking about it, where like if you know that Dalton Schultz is going to get a 28% target share, like obviously you would play more at flex also, but he's 30 whatever percent owned at flex. If you know he's going to get a 28% target share, I want like you're maximizing your potential payoff by like getting more of that where he's 2% owned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's where it really stands out is the captain spot, and like he's decent price at 6,400. So like for captain, you can get to a lot more by playing Schultz, and like there aren't a lot of players in that price range. So like people are going to have completely different builds than you are if you put Dalton Schultz at captain as well. So kind of a lot going for him there. By the way, Hulk Smash Potato says Cade Stover 4 catches in week 1 before the injury. Seems like he was going to have a role. Thank you, vindicated on my 2 Cade Stover shares. All right.
Yeah, I mean, he ran 35% of routes week 1.
He got hurt in week 1. That wasn't even a full. I don't think it was a full game. I might be. I'm going to go with that narrative. Defenses and kickers. Bills defense 4,800 projected for 21% flex ownership. I got to 24 and 3 at captain. Kaimi Fairbairn 5,000 project for 26% flex, 1% captain. I got to 22%. Matt Prater 5,200. Damn, project for 36% flex, 3% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I got to 13%. And then Texans defense 4,400 projected for 11% flex. I got to 11%. I'd say that for the most part looks pretty good to me. What are you doing with kickers and defenses? Oh shit!
Yeah,
I didn't. Wait. Sorry. We got to go back and do. This is the second time I've done this. I got called out last week for skipping over the tight ends on a team, and I just did that again. Didn't even talk about the Bills tight ends.
I think I caught it last week and then I forgot to mention it, or I just was tired of doing this and didn't care.
You're just like, I want to be done with the show. That's fair. Yeah, that is reasonable. But because I already did it last week, I'm not going to do it again. We have to do the Bills tight ends. Dawson Knox 4,000 projected for 21% flex ownership. I got to 21% flex plus 3% at captain of Dawson Knox. Again, just looking at the role last week for Dawson Knox with no Dalton Kincaid. By the way, Dalton Kincaid out again this week. Pretty strong role last week. So we'll start with Dawson Knox, and then if you have any interest in Jackson Hawes, what are you doing with the Bills tight ends?
Yeah, I mean, 2 games without Dalton Kincaid so far this season, 2 full games, 77 and 85% route participation for Knox. Nice role as far as being on the field running routes, not somebody that gets super heavily targeted. They will obviously use him in the red zone. He does have plenty of touchdown equity. I'm even with the field here. He's getting 20% ownership. I have 19%. I do have 3% at captain where he's not projected for any ownership. He is somebody where I would say you need to be very aware, if you are playing him at captain, of exactly what those lineups look like from a dupe standpoint. You see it a lot where if you're using, depending on how you're estimating your dupes, but like if you're just using some sort of product own type process, a lot of times you'll get Dawson Knox, nobody's going to play him at captain, so he's not going to be duped. And it's like, there's 3 viable ways to play Dawson Knox at captain, so he's actually going to be duped 300 times in each of those. Definitely the kind of guy where you do want to pay attention to exactly what you're doing there. But ultimately, I think he's just kind of a guy at 4K. He's going to run routes. He's probably not going to be targeted that much, but that kind of is the case for like everybody on this slate. Jackson Hawes 2K. I was actually surprised he didn't run more routes last week. I expect that he'll run more this week. You had actually seen him in the 4 games prior 3 of these, well, 2.5 had Kincaid, but 29, 27, 28, 23% route participation. This was somebody that early in the year wasn't running a lot of routes. They were talking about him, talking him up as a really good blocker. He's on the field, blah, blah, blah. Then he started like translating that into running more routes. And then last week went back to running 10% routes, give or take. I assume that, he's probably back closer to 20 this week, but doesn't have to be. Either way, I'm not really getting to him because I do think that right now he's projected for 10% ownership at 2K. Cade Stover is getting 1% ownership at 600. I'd rather play Cade Stover.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I forget who it was, but I swear I was on I think the Bills were on the main slate last week. Maybe I misremember him, but I did a show with someone where they brought up I brought up Dawson Knox, and they're like, oh, I have more interest in Jackson Hawes, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. He is going to clearly have a bigger role. Pretty shocking to see that his role was worse with no Dalton Kincaid there, and it was just Dawson Knox. But wouldn't be that shocking if Jackson Hawes does come back to a bigger role now that just the route share, like you said, 24, 20, 28, and then you have no Dalton Kincaid, drops down to 9%, was not the outcome that we expected. Wasn't targeted last week, but I think still viable. Well, like you said, if he actually gets 11% ownership at 2,000, Cade Stover looks like the better of the backup tight ends to me. Also, although maybe Jackson Hawes more likely of the two of them to suddenly see 40% route participation. I actually don't even know if that's true.
Stover.
I think it might be too, actually.
Yeah. Hawes too, if you wanted to make a bear case for him, not that you really need to, but they are playing a good Houston team, a good Houston pass rush. He is your guy that is he's staying in the block before Dawson Knox is.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, and looking at the schedule adjusted for tight ends, it's the fifth worst matchup for Houston tight ends. It is a bottom, 12 or so matchup for Buffalo tight ends. So negative matchup for the tight ends in this one as well. All right, anything else on tight ends? We started to talk about kickers and defenses, so I'll just send it to you. Kickers and defenses, what are you doing there?
Yeah, nothing super interesting to me there. 27%. Or 30% total Bills for me. So I actually have 4% Bills captain, which is disgusting, but it is Davis Mills. He is fully capable of having a really bad game. 21% flex ownership projected the Bills. I have 27. So I'm a little bit over the field on Bills defense. I'm a little bit under the field I'm a little bit under the field on Fairbairn. I only have 10% Prater. 39% combined ownership just seems like a ton. For a kicker, especially I've said it before, but slates like this, I generally just am a little bit less interested in kickers because they have a higher projection than other people around them, a higher median projection. But you have so many wide receivers that are the same price or even cheaper, and they just have so much volatility in their scoring that if they're going to be similarly owned or lower owned, usually I'm going to prefer going the cheap wide receiver, cheap tight end route. The 4K to 5K wide receiver tight end route. So I think that is keeping my interest in the kickers down a little bit as well, along with just how much ownership they're getting. And then I'm basically in line with ownership on Houston, getting 13% of them. Good defense, terrible matchup, but 4,400, good defense.
Yeah, I'm tempted to get to more of the Texans defense. I think the Bills defense just looks objectively great. They have a strong defense going up against Davis Mills, and just a lack of offensive line for the Texans. Davis Mills sacked 6 times in his 2 starts, and one of those against Tennessee. This is a defense that can certainly give them some trouble. But then I don't know, Josh Allen has thrown 7 interceptions in 10 games. He's only sacked 2 times per game, but this is a really good Texans defense, so it's kind of and really fast Texans defense, so they might give the Bills trouble. I don't know, it's tough to but it's tough to want to get to too much more, just because it's also not unlikely that the Bills put up 30 plus fantasy points, so you really need them to get some turnovers, some sacks, touchdowns, something like that. So I might be slightly over the field on 11%, but this seems about right, honestly. What I'm getting here generally seems like where I'd like to be, like the Bills defense. Anything else on this slate before we get out of here?
No.
Okay. We're going to get out of here then. I will, of course, be back before lock once again to break down this whole slate about 80 minutes prior to lock. I will be doing the same thing after we get inactives news position by position, and then I will run the sims and make my lineups right on the stream later tonight. So hopefully I will see you guys there. Good luck tonight, everybody. Thanks for joining us.